This is about how America is safer, stronger, more prosperous when we have a fair, orderly, and humane legal immigration system. And with the first action today, we're going to work to undo the moral and national shame of the previous administration that literally, not figuratively, ripped children from the arms of their families, their mothers and fathers at the border, and with no plan, none whatsoever, to reunify the children who are still in custody and their parents.
President Biden earlier this week announcing new executive orders he signed to roll back some of the Trump administration's most hardline immigration policies. That includes changing how the government will refer to migrants. They had officially been referred to as unaccompanied aliens, but now they'll be called non-citizen children. The administration also is trying to deal with the root causes of the migrant surge, namely problems in the so-called Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Vice President Kamala Harris, the point person on that, she's been speaking with the leaders of those countries, and today the VP discussed what's going on down there that's causing people to flee in huge numbers.
We are looking at, therefore, a number of issues that also relate to poverty, extreme poverty, and also there's violence, obviously, coming out of those regions. When you look at the root causes, we're also looking at the issue of corruption. Again, we're looking at the issue of climate resiliency, and then the concern about a lack of economic opportunity. So how I see it is that for us to be effective in that region, among the work that we can do together, we have to give people a sense of hope. A sense of hope that help is on the way.
In the meantime, the situation on our side of the border is not getting much better. Washington Post reporting the U.S. government has never had so many migrant children in its care, with more than 20,000 held in shelters and another 2,200 waiting in border facilities for beds to open up. I want to bring in my guest to discuss Ali Noorani. He is President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Immigration Forum. He's kind enough to give us a few minutes. Ali, let's start by eliminating, let's say, the fringe, which believes that all immigrants are against the national interest. Take those folks out of the equation. Reasonable people will agree that this is America. Immigration's part of our DNA, and empathy is important here. At the same end, we can't just have open borders. What is a practical and enforceable policy as it relates, let's start with asylum?
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right. People do not want a border that they feel is out of control. And right now, the fact is that a lot of Americans, they have a lot of questions about immigration at large, but also how is the Biden administration really going to understand who is coming to the border, who's applying for protection, and why. So a functioning asylum system is one that understands the criteria or the pressures that are forcing people out of their home countries, whether that is persecution because of their politics, their religion, their gender, a member of a social group, or their race. Those are the 5 basic criteria for asylum. But the challenge for the United States is to ensure that we have the infrastructure and the personnel to process those asylum claims. Because not everyone who applies for asylum should receive asylum, but we as a nation should make sure that all of these applications have their fair day. And that's why I think what the Biden administration is doing in terms of really trying to get the immigration judges to the border, get the asylum officers to the border, so that these applications can be processed in a fair and equitable and efficient way.
Ali, I've spent countless hours with a lot of the principals, including the ACLU, who uncovered the unconscionable policies of the last administration. And I think the current president said it right, intentionally ripping apart kids from their parents. But even if I'm grading on a curve, the current administration, I don't know if it's they didn't walk and chew gum the first time, how long it took them to say the word crisis and why they so struggled with language, but they still have yet to do any family reunifications. Am I expecting too much within the nearly first 100 days here, or did you yourself expect there'd be a more coherent plan to deal with the influx that happens always around this time of season, but also given the political changes that at least those people thought they'd find a more hospitable welcoming than they've gotten to this point? Are you satisfied with how the first 3+ months of this administration has gone on the immigration front?
Well, I don't want to be seen as defending the Biden administration, but I think we have to understand a couple of factors. There was no traditional transition period for the Biden administration. They didn't have access to a lot of information. It was very hard to understand how undermined or torpedoed the immigration system was, much less the infrastructure at the border. But that said, I think one of the shortcomings of the Biden administration has been over the last 3 months or so is that as they've stood up these plans, the public has had very little visibility into what is being done. So therefore, it's just a lot of questions and people are speculating, and we don't know exactly, what the goals are the administration is aiming for. So when it comes to family reunification, why haven't any of these children been reunited with their families? What's the process that the administration is going through, working in Central America to identify families? Why haven't we seen more children kind of going through this process? And where's the actual bottleneck? If there's one thing that I think we took away from the Trump administration is that the American public realizes this is a complicated problem. So the administration needs to be comfortable saying, okay, this is our complicated set of solutions to address these challenges.
To that end, we talk across each other, especially in the hyper-partisan world we're in, and, there's the back and forth where, if you believe in any kind of immigration reform, then you are for open borders. And conversely, if people are concerned and want to restrict access, then they're nativist. Is there a bipartisan play here, Ali, in that I know that in a lot of border states, they rely on a lot of these folks for a lot of agricultural work, et cetera, and it's not just in Texas and Arizona, it's beyond that. If there is adults at a table, is there a pathway that actually works in this political climate? I'm talking for meaningful reform.
Yeah, I mean, if we were having this conversation 3 weeks ago, I would say probably not. But over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've really seen in the Senate in particular some real serious conversations taking place in a bipartisan fashion, building on, frankly, the bipartisan legislation that passed the House earlier this Congress to address Dreamers and farm workers. So what's happening in the Senate now is you have Senator Durbin working with Senator Cornyn and a number of Democrats and Republicans sitting down and saying, okay, what's the solution for DACA recipients? What's the solution for the agricultural sector? And what's the solution at the border so that we have an asylum system that can manage these flows? And so I'm very optimistic that over the next couple of days, these bipartisan solutions will start to really gel so that going into the balance of the spring and into the summer, there can actually be some serious negotiations that gets us to a bill that has a real chance of getting to the 60 votes that we need. So I do think that there's more momentum right now than, frankly, I've seen for a number of years.
I like the optimism, Ali. Finally, is it semantics or is the change of language when dealing with this population from aliens to now the new term, is it a distinction with a difference?
I've always believed that the immigration debate for so many Americans is not about politics and policy, right? We often kind of, your cable news is about, who's up and who's down. I think at its core, our nation's immigration debate is about culture and values. And that in so many ways boils down to the language that we use. So we do a lot of work with conservative faith communities. They don't see the immigrant or the refugee in their church as an alien. They see them as their brother and sister in their faith. So I think it's great that the government language is starting to honor the dignity of immigrants because quite frankly, a lot of folks who see themselves as conservative Republicans, they see the dignity in the immigrant as well. And I think that that's the opportunity for Republicans and Democrats is to see immigration as an opportunity to really expand the coalition and really play a pivotal role in bringing the country back together. So I think the language changes really helps us have the right sort of cultural conversation that we need.
Ali, always appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, when we come back, we will have the very latest from Capitol Hill. We'll be joined by our good friend, ABC News political director Rick Klein. We'll talk about the negotiations over an infrastructure plan, the battle over voting rights, and much more.